I should say that my name is Ed Stevenette. I think I know many of you, but for those who don't, I am part of the international team at Learning Planet Institute, based in Paris. We'll take a couple of minutes in a second to present a little bit what we do and why we're bringing this conversation to you today alongside UNESCO, and joined by a really fantastic set of colleagues, and thankfully as well some of our wonderful youth members from around the world too. I'm just trying to multitask a second as we're having lots and lots of people joining in, and I'm now very glad that I decided to get the large meeting license, because otherwise people would have been blocked out. So that's a good sign. So just if you give me 1 second more as I add these in. To give you a quick picture of the session today, so we have 90 minutes together. What we'll be doing in a second is just starting with a very short survey on 3 core questions. As we asked, we're really focusing today on getting your views firstly, and on those of the speakers, on what co-design is as a definition. Secondly, how you see co-designing learning. And then thirdly, co-designing learning with youth. So I'm going to just share that with you via the chat in just a moment. And then we will be passing on to an amazing set of case studies from different parts of the world and different sections, areas of education. So we'll be really glad and very grateful to be starting with Professor Manja Klemenčič, the Associate Senior Lecturer in Sociology and General Education at Harvard University. And particularly in this case, we're really excited to hear her spare about the Bloomsbury Handbook of Student Politics and Representation. So that will really be looking at governance in learning. Then we'll be exploring advocacy. And so we're really grateful to have Lotfi Alawad, the Program Manager from the UNESCO Education section, as well as Arissa Roy, one of our amazing youth community, but also amongst many other things, a student at the United World College of the Adriatic, and a co-chair of the Healthy Safe Spaces division of the UNESCO SDG for Youth and Students Network. And then we will lastly be looking at co-design in the context of curriculum. And so at that point, we'll have Francois, the founder, president, and chief exploration officer at Learning Planet Institute, sharing alongside Michael, good friend Michael Winter, the president of Oikos, international co-president rather. And then at that point, we'll be hearing from some of the finalists from our University Design Challenge. So that's a lot of different people, lots of different case studies, but then we'll be passing it to you in the final 30 minutes or so of the session, as we'll be looking at what are some of the core guiding principles that you see for co-designing the future of learning with youth. And that will close off building this really, hopefully, valuable resource base to take our work further moving forward. So without further ado, I am going to just add into the chat a link to the Mentimeter, and I'm also going to share my screen so that you can see it. Here we go. So the first one, what does co-design mean to you? So we have, and I'm just going to present this so that you can actually share as well. 1 second. I'll just be sharing the link into the chat. So first question, add it in. If you just click on the link into the chat, and then if you give me a second so that I can then share it on my screen, is in 5 words, what does co-design mean to you? So we'll just take 2 minutes on that as we're welcoming everybody in to the session. If I could ask you also to be adding in people from the waiting room, that'd be great. Thank you. So firstly, what does co-design mean to you? There is a link inside the chat. So Mia, if I could just ask you to post that again. And for those of you who are just seeing it in French, I do apologize for that, but it is just asking you to add words. So the words will appear and it's okay in English. Okay. There we go. Super. So we already have 102 responses on the screen. And you're seeing that they're being grouped by the keywords. So we're starting with particularly collaboration. We've got closely with agency, diversity, empathy. Okay. I'm seeing that brainstorming is appearing more and more as well. We'll just give a few more moments for getting the final views. And I'm seeing as well from the chat that we have collaborative learning experience. Okay. Collective ownership, involving community stakeholders. For those in the chat, if you would like to add your ideas, you can just follow the link and I will copy it again into the chat to share your views if you would like. So on menti.com, as I'm adding in the final people, I see trust and daring coming up as well. Fantastic. Right, so what we're going to do now is go to the second question. So what does co-designing learning mean to you? So we will open up this question. So you should now be able to head on to there again via the participation link. And I'm just sharing again into the chat. So we've started with co-design. Now we're looking at co-designing learning. We're putting together the puzzle for the session today. And once you're done, you can head back to our screen to start seeing the word cloud as it's forming. Thank you, Mia, for adding it in again. So interestingly, as this word cloud is forming, we're seeing that now inclusion and inclusivity, and inclusive is coming up more and more and more as we're bringing learning into the phrase. Okay, and I'm just going to pass on lastly, as we'll give a moment more for the final. There's already lots of ideas coming in still. Great. So for the final slide, you might have guessed it, we're going to be looking at what does co-designing learning with youth mean to you? So we're curious to see how this evolves as we add a few more layers to the prompt. If anyone has any comments or realizations from looking at this word cloud as it's developing, please do add them in the chat and we will try to come back to them over the course of the session. Is there anything that strikes you as surprising, something that you already expect, something that you might feel is missing? Give a few more moments for the final suggestions to come through. So for those who have just been arriving, firstly, very much welcome to you. We've been starting off, warming up into this session by looking at how we view co-design, co-designing learning, and co-designing learning with youth and students. So you can start to see some of the ideas that have been shared by the group via the screen and also into the chat as well. Okay, so we'll be sharing the results of these over the course of the session. So we'll make sure to pass on that link for you as well. What we want to just do now, very, very briefly, is to give you a little bit of a picture, very, very briefly in 2 minutes, of how we enter into this conversation at Learning Planet Institute. And so then we will be passing on into the really fantastic set of case studies that we have with us today. So very briefly, this will come back in the session, but at Learning Planet Institute, we were founded around a lab table 20 years ago, connecting students together with the vision of how they can learn about other disciplines. And as this has evolved over the course of 20 years, and that lab table has got a little bit bigger, we're now based in Paris in a wonderful campus that you're all very welcome to visit. But we're blessed as well to have an international community around the world, and notably of young people who are here today. But those same values of how we connect different disciplines together and how we co-construct as well has stayed from the very beginning. And so we have a fantastic team looking at researching scientific ways of learning, notably through artificial and collective intelligence. We have programs. So I'm an alumni from our Learning Science Master. We also have a fantastic PhD community as well, very much geared towards experiential learning. And then we notably, amongst other things, mobilize, as we said, an international community of partners, many of which of you have met us through the Learning Planet Alliance that we launched with UNESCO in 2020, and particularly through our Learning Planet Festival in January every year, which is a huge celebration of what might work, new visions of education across the world, with hundreds of workshops, exhibitions, hackathons, events, bringing together new ideas, solutions, and examples of how we can rethink education systems as well. Since 2014, we've been collaborating with UNESCO, notably through our Learning Sciences Chair. And as I mentioned, we signed the Learning Planet Open Alliance in 2019, which really called for bringing together this open community of actors in reinventing and rethinking education, bringing them together and sharing how we can work to really foster new forms of education to meet the transitions of our time. To bring it to the conversation today, 2 years ago in the Transforming Education Summit, the UN Secretary General, Antonio Gutierrez, declared that there are 4 ways that we might interact with youth. We can either ignore them, we can pretend to listen, we can dialogue, or we can co-construct the future. And that's really stuck with us in our work, which some of our youth members will share a little bit later in the session, how we can meaningfully co-construct the future, notably of higher education, particularly with the support of UNESCO as well. And so this has been a journey over the past year, if not more, where we've been having conversations, notably in New York at the UN General Assembly, but also with students in Paris and also online, thinking at, if we were to co-design a new form of higher education, what might we be doing there? Who might we be seeing? What might we be feeling while we're there? And certainly what might we be studying? And so this has gathered a really fantastic set of resources that we are bringing with us into this design journey over the coming months. And I will come back to this slide later that we'll share with you, but here are some key elements that have emerged from our work on co-design, and particularly with reference to the purpose that Francois will mention later, on designing spaces for the best learners, not in the world, but for the world. And also looking at values, bringing together youth leadership, radical collaboration. I saw that in the chat, I believe, from Patricia. Openness and transparency, especially as well. And I'll just pause there now, because we'll be sharing a little bit later how we are viewing this through our Learning Planet Youth Design Challenge. So I will just take that off the screen for now. But with all that being said, I'm really delighted now to get started with our case studies for the session. And so it's a real pleasure to give the floor first to Manja to share more around co-designing with youth in educational governance. And as we've asked each speaker to share what they see co-design as, what they've learned in their process about doing this with students, and then sharing how they've put this into practice as well. So Manja, it's a pleasure to give the floor to you now for the next 10 minutes.
Ed, thank you so much for the floor. Thank you so much for the invitation. Just looking at who is with us today in this room, I feel I am with people that I share a lot, have a lot in common, the educationalists, people who believe in youth participation in transforming education. So it's a real pleasure to be here. And the key words that we were collecting on the cloud are all that very echo and resonate with my own work. So I will be focusing in this first 10 minutes on youth involvement in educational governance. And we'll start this presentation with a particular handbook that was a result of a co-design with youth. It is the first book that demonstrates and gives ample examples from around the world how young people, students in particular, are involved in governance of higher education institutions, in national policy processes towards education reforms and in international organizations as well. And this particular handbook offers ample evidence to support the thesis that students have agency in educational governance. That means that they have capabilities to intervene in and influence higher education structures and processes, that they are not merely beneficiaries of this. So the handbook has lots of chapters from different countries, but also from the Global Student Forum as the global representation of students, and several regional student organizations from all African student unions, the Commonwealth Student Association, European student unions as well. And the co-design in preparing this particular handbook, and I put the link to open access that you can download freely from the Bloomsbury collections, meant that in this case, student leaders, student representatives, those that are elected into the role of representing students, are not merely subjects that scholars are researching. The usual way that scholars like myself would go to student leaders and interview student leaders or survey student leaders on their experiences in student politics, representations, but they were actually empowered to become researchers and to conduct their own research and then write chapters that were published in this handbook. So it meant everything what we have seen previously in the cloud world. It meant empowerment of the student leaders. It meant breaking of barriers between academics, the scholars, and those that are practitioners in the roles of student representatives in the governance of institutions. It meant also affirming that student leaders have valuable knowledge and experiences that can inform us and educate us, and that we together are a powerful learning community that can learn from each other. So in a way, in this handbook, what we did is we enabled student leaders to conduct research and develop research skills and write academic chapters for a solid, respectable academic publication. And that meant, in a way, what we have taken as a concept is we have taken research as a form of leadership practice for the student leaders themselves personally, but also for the organizations that they represent, to develop research capacity of these organizations that would help them with their own organizational development and organizational learning down the line. So that was the kind of a concept of the book. And now maybe just briefly, what did we learn? Some kind of a common lessons or insights on youth involvement in education leadership. What we know, and maybe let me define it first, because Ed and colleagues have said, let's give a definition first. And in the context of the governance, we have defined co-design as youth involvement in the sense that youth, students, in this case, are considered full partners in the decision processes that concern them in the context of education institutions that they are part of, or education systems on a national and a global level. So full partners with full rights of co-designing the education policies and deciding on those. So we go from what could be just a source of information where students are just surveyed or interviewed as a source of information, to where they are consulted possibly at discussion of education leaders that they need some feedback on certain policy, to actually the stage where we see them as full partners with voting rights, with full participation in all of the stages of decision-making processes or public policy processes. We are speaking about decisions on the national level or within international organizations. So that was the kind of, so again, not merely beneficiaries of those education policies, but co-designers of them. And well, representation has always been seen as the most, as having most potential for young people to be having a voice in decision-making processes, and or having most impact on the policies within the education institutions, within schools, universities, colleges, but also within the public policy processes on national and international levels. And the representation, the handbook writes about this amply, presumes that two conditions are met. One is that there exist some representative bodies that are democratic, autonomous, that aggregate and organize the interest of students in particular, or young people more generally, so the interest of the collective student body. And then secondly, that there exist some mechanisms of representation, so some structures and processes that allow those student representatives and the organizations that they present to intermediate the interest and to voice the concerns of the students into the decision-making processes and into the decision-making bodies. That can be seats and votes in academic senates. What we know from experience is that where student representation exists in universities and colleges, typically, and this is European context, and public universities also in other parts of the world, students would have something about 15 to 25% of votes in the academic senates. The biggest one that we have found is Czech Republic, where they have minimum a third of votes and seats in academic senates. That's the most that we have found when we were surveying across the globe. Or that there is an advisory body to the governments on the national level or to the international organizations where students have a seat and are regularly and consulted. So there is a kind of a formalized way of consulting student and youth representatives. However, what we also know is that representation is not perfect, right? Student representatives can sometimes be just the elite who, after the elections, becomes alienated from the student body and kind of forgets the constituency that has elected them to those roles, does not consult them frequently to get to understand their grievances and their interests, can be domesticated by those that they're trying to influence, by the university leaderships or by the governments. That's often shown as well. The lack of legitimacy of student governments is often shown by low election turnout by students. So it's not always, it's not the perfect picture. But still, it is the best, the most potential for influence that we see in the context of the governance, education governance. Another way the students are involved, and I'm soon wrapping up, is the involvement through quality assurance processes and the structures. So often what we have seen now is that students have been regularly surveyed on their feedback on the course quality or the professors' quality, and often there are also satisfaction surveys of students. This is a way of students to have a say in the education governance, but is often not democratic. So those student experts that play the quality assurance roles are not necessarily student representatives, but can be cherry-picked among the students who are constructive, friendly with the administration, seen as unproblematic and will be constructive. So it's that kind of, and often are seen almost as an extension of administration. So they become, they take on this expert role, sometimes even paid roles. But it is a way of them of being involved in the decisions that concern students and the institutions and universities. There are alternatives as well. I have reviewed a master's thesis a few years ago from University of Sydney in Australia, where they have experimented with a form called direct voice as a feedback mechanism designed specifically to canvass and to kind of mobilize the voice of the collective student body. So beyond the student representation, beyond the student involvement in quality assurance, they wanted to energize the entire student body to give feedback on the policies or planned activities that will directly affect students. And by this, what they have tried to do is they have tried to kind of enact a higher order of organizational learning and increase student agentic behavior, but also student agentic understanding of what's going on in their education environment, so that students can have the agency to influence it, at least to have a voice to give direct feedback on those initiatives. So this is kind of a quick sample of the possibilities. But the final answer of the best way of capturing student voice and involving students and young people in education governance is not yet found. So I do have a question for you for the later on discussion is, if you were to design a new school, or let's say a new university, how would you involve students in the governance, in the decision processes of this university? Are there alternatives to those that I have mentioned? What would be the best way of having student voice in transforming the education? And maybe just a little footnote, what I have added in chat at the very early stages of the chat as well is a reference to the Youth Declaration on Transforming Higher Education. And this Youth Declaration is the first document that actually spells out and affirms this idea of students and young people as partners in transforming education, in decisions that will bring about transformation of education. And so if we think about the definitions of co-design, it's there, very spelled out better than we have seen it earlier, at least in my time. So I'll stop here, but I'm alerting again with a question. If you were designing a university, how would you involve students in the governance, in the decision processes of that institution? Thank you.
Thank you so much, Manja. So much to gather from that intervention as well. And noted that given how many messages there are in the chat, we had to repost a few times the links to the book. So do post, Manja, again, if there's any other message or any other resources that would be of use. And your points that you shared on the Youth Declaration for the Transforming Education Summit is really timely, because we're now going to go into looking at advocacy, and really delighted to have Arissa Roy, I mentioned at the beginning, who is one of the members of the UNESCO SDG for Youth and Students Network, which was partly founded to implement some of the different findings from the Youth Declaration. So Arissa, I'd love to give you first the floor to share some of your experiences being part of these co-design processes in UNESCO as well. And I think it would be great for everybody to hear maybe briefly your experience at UWC, which is one of the great exhibitors of co-designing and bringing you together as well. So Arissa, over to you.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you so much. First of all, I just want to say what an honor it is to be here today with all of you. I think it gives me a lot of hope. I feel like today in this world, it's easy to feel a bit hopeless when it comes to the future. But when we see so many people coming together in support of such important work, at least for me, it gives a lot of hope. So thank you all. So I'm just going to share my screen because I have a few slides. So bear with me a moment. Okay. Whoops. Okay. Sorry, guys. All right. So today I thought I'd center my presentation around what I believe is one of the keys to co-design as a young person, and that is storytelling. So it's actually really funny that our previous speaker was talking about the Youth Declaration, which is what I wanted to start off talking about as well. So in 2022, basically a Youth Declaration was created with approximately 450,000 young people, which is insane and such an incredible number. And essentially, it just highlights the key messaging and desires of youth when it comes to what we would like future of our education systems to look like. And as Ed mentioned, I'm a member of the SDG4 Youth and Student Network, which is a key platform and group of young people that are trying to advocate for the implementation of the declaration. And I wanted to start off with this because as someone who participated in forming and creating the declaration as a young person, I think the most important tool we had through that was the ability to listen and to share our own stories. So I'll give you a little, oh yeah, first of all, I don't know if you knew this, but stories are remembered up to 22 times more than facts alone. And that's I mean, that is a fact by Stanford University, but it's really, I think it speaks to how important just sharing our own stories are. So I can give you a brief overview of my story and why I'm here today. So as an example of young people sharing stories. So when I was 12 years old, I had the opportunity to visit India, which is where my family is from. I didn't say at the beginning, but I am from Toronto, Canada. And my first trip to India was extremely eye-opening in the sense that before going, I had no idea to what extent education in a lot of communities was not just a given. I think, you know, I grew up in a very sheltered environment where I didn't know the issues that were happening beyond my bubble. And I think that's the case for a lot of young people these days, where we all grow up in our own little world. And if we don't have the opportunities to hear other people's stories, to see how their lives are, then we'll never know kind of the challenges that they're facing and therefore never know how to help them. So, and be part of like a system, changing the system kind of. So after my trip, I came home. I was like, I want to do something about it because I was literally shocked at the fact that something that seems so basic to me, attending school, something that, you know, my friends here were like, why do we have to do this? Like, it's school, like we get homework and stuff. Like it was not like, it was a privilege in a lot of communities. And so I decided to like come up with this charity idea, which I didn't end up launching till 2020 because as a young person who has been told that you can't do anything when you're under 18 or you don't have a voice or leave it to the adults, I had no kind of courage to do anything. And it wasn't until I was inspired by the work of frontline healthcare workers, which my mom was one of them during the pandemic, that I saw the power of helping others and how we all have an ability to make a difference in the world. And so I decided to launch the project, and now we are a global team of youth advocating for not just access to education, but access to quality and equitable education. And since then, I've been able to work with many organizations, including through the UNESCO SDG4 Youth and Student Network. So that's a little bit about my story. And now in terms of how storytelling has impacted my journey, aside from my very first trip to India, when I went back to India a few years ago, I decided that my work became a lot harder because people were not understanding the issues that I was hearing about. And so I decided, why not just, you know, let people share their stories on a wider platform. So I decided to film a documentary project, which highlighted the stories of communities that we were working with so that they could share firsthand from their own experiences what needs to change and what sort of support that they needed at the time. So that was a key point. Also, I'm going to try and speed up. I know we have limited time. Another point or moment in my journey was writing a children's book, which was a way for me to share my grandmother's story. She had passed away on my birthday, and she was one of the people who inspired me the most, about like how we all have this ability to make a difference in the world. She would always say, like, you know, imagine like a rock, you know, when you throw it in the water and it creates ripples. That's kind of like people, like we have the ability to create ripples of change. So that's another example. And then on the other side of the screen here is a photo of me and some friends from school. My school is an international school called United World Colleges, where we have students from over 80 countries coming together. And basically, it's 2 years of just storytelling, essentially. And this is where so many of our lessons are learned. I mean, we are an IB school. I'm sure a lot of you know IB. But I think beyond IB, like the most powerful learning is when we're just talking together in our cafeteria and learning about other people's lives in other parts of the world. So to summarize, I want to say 3 things. First of all, let's continue to utilize storytelling to guide the creation of innovative solutions when we look at education systems today. Make sure
The
we
recording
reach
has
youth
stopped.
where they're at. I think that's really key, because as someone who, again,
This meeting is being
no,
recorded.
has not been given an opportunity to participate in spaces like this in the past, you know, it's really important to give youth that seat. And lastly, see us young people as partners, not just advisors. So we want to be here because this is also our future, and we deserve to have a seat. So yeah, thank you all so much for listening, and it's a pleasure again to be here. Merci.
Thank you, merci. Thank you so much, Arissa. Arissa, can you just share back very briefly to the final slide?
Yes, for sure.
Because it'd be just great, very, very briefly, also as a lot of you came in late, and so we want to give you a chance to be able to share on your experience of this particularly. But you are part of our most recent consultation with UNESCO, with youth delegates in various different networks. Perhaps just with the slide up, you could share a little bit more briefly on what that was about and how it connected to your experience of storytelling. Thank you.
Yeah, for sure. So a few weeks ago, so a team at UNESCO and also Learning Planet were able to host this consultation where, again, I think it was all centered around storytelling as well. But the key was to advise on like the future of like higher education, essentially, and what that looks like and what young people think we need to do in order to make sure our higher education institutions are like serving the needs of us today. I mean, in terms of things that I thought were really key and that I took away personally were conversations around even just like course content and how I think a lot of us today as young people see the value in interdisciplinary studies and how so many different like industries, no matter if you're a business student or a law student, like it all kind of intertwines, and giving young people the opportunity to see how they can play a role in even just with like the sustainable development goals of the UN. Kind of how through their own like majors and work they can help elevate the work that's being done on an international scale. I think another key takeaway that I'll just mention briefly is the fact that young people have been kind of demanding this change for a long time. And I think that we kind of need now the support of all of you here today and more partners, because I think it's a really critical moment, especially as we're heading into 2025, where we have 5 years left to try and finish the 2030 agenda, all the SDGs. That's not that much time. And so I think I took away this sense of urgency in order to act on a lot of the discussions we were having. So Yeah, and I hope that kind of was able to highlight overview, but if there's
That's
anything
lovely.
else, I'm happy. Yeah.
No, thank you. Thank you so much. That's really, really helpful. And indeed, it's part of the process. I'm seeing a lot of conversation in the chat about this difficulty of a sense of inertia and a challenge in being able to impact the system. And I think something that we've been exploring a lot with different partners and the UN is trying to see how we can move beyond just consultation and feed in what does it look like to gather examples and to co-design from the very beginning of a learning process with those people that we're serving as well. And I think that that connects quite neatly to our next section. So thank you very much, Arissa, for sharing as well. We're going to be looking at how we can co-design with youth in the curriculum. And so I'm really glad to first pass to Michael Winter, the co-president of Oikos, before we'll then be looking at a little bit how we've approached this with our Youth Design Challenge. But Michael will be able to share more about how Oikos have explored this through particularly sustainability and management. And yeah, I'll give you the floor, Michael, to share more.
Hey, thank you, Edward. Yeah, first of all, thank you so much for having me today. I hope you can hear me well. Please interrupt me if my connection drops at any point because I'm sitting in China. I'm on vacation actually, but I really wanted to take the chance to speak to all of you. And yeah, I'm gonna try sharing my screen as I also have some slides that I want to share here with you. I hope you can see those. And first of all, welcome. It's nice to meet you. I have planned the next 9 minutes and 45 seconds in such a way that we have enough time to spare a moment and check in with ourselves. So, are you still present? Do you have a to-do list on your mind that you still need to check off, or did a pop-up on your screen take your attention and you're thinking about how to answer that mail? Do you want to be present? The next 9 minutes, 30 seconds will be worthwhile for you if you know about sustainability and transdisciplinarity and multi-stakeholder perspectives and learner-centric and all the other buzzwords of learning and pedagogy in the 21st century that you hear so often but don't know what they could mean for your daily work. It will be worthwhile if you believe that schools and universities should prepare young people for a world full of transformations and changes, a VUCA or Bani world, and that you're also not sure that the education system right now is actually pretty good at this. So in 2019, Oikos International, the umbrella organization to almost 50 local chapters at that time, installed the Curriculum Change Initiative, what I'm asked to talk about today. And that was to foster changes or updates in management and economics at curricula within their universities. So Oikos students would have been, you could say, Oikos students have been walking the talk of bringing sustainability to higher education for many years. As one of the early milestones, Oikos, together with the Oikos Foundation back then, were the creators of an institute, of the Institute for Economy and Environment at University of St. Gallen in 1992. So we founded an institute there for sustainable economics within one of the most competitive and elite business schools of the world. Yet with said curriculum change initiative, we missed the point. And it took us 2 years to really figure that out. The framing of curriculum change is far too narrow. If you tell a professor or a curriculum commission that they had to include sustainability and skills for the 21st century into the curriculum, they will look at that one specific curriculum that might apply to one course, or if you're lucky, apply to a study program and give it an update. The curriculum commission that might, again, if you're lucky, include 1 or 2 students will not spend a single thought on how to actually include transdisciplinarity or how to use this opportunity to break up silos within the university. And we do not want to fall into that trap, and you don't want to fall into that either. That is why we renamed our curriculum change initiative into Transforming Education. Our current educational system is around 100 years old and based on the principles from the time of the Industrial Revolution. The world was complicated. People had to know how to analyze correctly and then act respectively. Henry Ford, you know him, he could disrupt an entire industry by analyzing how cars were built and figuring out a better way of allocating resources. That made his company successful for decades to come. Today, disruptions are a daily habit. Use 5 minutes of scrolling through social media and it will blow your mind in the best and in the worst way. Today's world is not complicated, it is complex, or Bani. Bani is kind of the evolution of VUCA, and it means brittle, anxious, non-linear, and incomprehensible. So you could say from curriculum change to industrial age, to transforming education, from industrial age to Bani. So there is a clear thing that we want to do. We want to get from this industrial age education to transformed education in 5 easy steps. Well, there is no 5 easy steps because that would come from the worldview of industrial age. You have to come up with your pretty much own way of changing your university, changing your school. You cannot do something that someone else did in your context because our contexts are so complex. I cannot give you that blueprint. But what I can give you is a few ideas and a few thoughts for the next few minutes. And let me start here with these beautiful pictures. So last year, I had the chance to visit one of the most magnificent schools in the world. There are many examples today of future thinking lighthouses, and this is one of them. Really imagine a sunny day at Leo Beach on an island in the Philippines. And David, the director of the Earth School, invited me to visit their school. As I'm walking up the stairs of this wooden round-shaped building, a bright space opens up in front of me. When turning from the far left to the far right, I can directly look into those classrooms, which are open compartments with small room dividers, and each compartment had a quite obviously different purpose. One with computers, one with geographical maps and pencils, some had tables, others pillows and mats to sit or lie down on the floor. A young girl ran past us and David stopped her to ask what she was doing, and he told her that I was a guest interested in how the school works. She said she doesn't have much time right now because they have their dress rehearsal for their play. Their play was about the weather and how it works and what effect climate change has on the local people. She said I should come to the show on Friday to learn more. Then she ran away towards the biggest compartment where other kids ranging from 11 to 16 years old were already waiting for her. David also told me that every Thursday school is taking place either at the beach or in the forest. A few weeks back, everyone was taking part in a beach and forest cleanup drive, which is, I guess, a very nice way to show students how to act responsibly towards nature, cleaning it. Well, they didn't stop there. Already while collecting the trash, they took photos and notes, and after they finished, they brought everything to the school building and did a full analysis of what they had found. Most common trash was packaging. They asked themselves, where does this trash come from? Where do people buy this? What do they typically buy? And who were those people littering? They connected a cleanup drive with a sociological analysis of the behavior of the people in the neighborhood. Some kids went further. They were inspired to act entrepreneurial and find solutions for the problems they found. Together with some teachers, they founded a project group to work further to a business idea that would improve the life of the people living in that area. So, curriculum change, right? How to co-design. You might ask yourself now, what should I possibly learn from a very much exceptional small school in the Philippines? You might think my school has 400 years of tradition. It has closed classrooms in this building, and there's no beach close by. I think you can get creative. My first idea is many students do cleanup drives. That's very straightforward. For Oikos, I have some examples at the University of St. Andrews or at the ISADE Business Schools, the Oikos chapter. So the students there do cleanup drives every year. I would advise both universities to support the students in their endeavors and support them in going 2 steps further, like doing a sociological analysis or showing them what the plastic's made of. So a question for you to take away here: how can you make space in your curricula so you can visit or start local student groups and include their project into courses while adding the professor's senior learning perspectives to improve the project and thus improving the learning journey of those students? And how can you make space for that? I believe to enable co-designing with youth, you have to become minimalists when working on curricula. Rather than adding stuff, you need to look at the content and gracefully take out as much as possible. Make space. 2 years ago, another story, I really tried to work on Arissa, but I also hope not to over time. 2 years ago, my Oikos home chapter at the University of Graz organized a panel discussion. And they invited the rector to the audience. Ellie, the student moderator, did a fantastic move when welcoming the rector in the audience and asking him to share his opinion on the matter at the end of the discussion, kind of forcing him to stay until then. He actually stayed, and after his comment, he said, "For all students, my door is always open." This sounds nice, but is not much more than empty words. The great thing that he did was coming to a student-initiated event and staying until the end, making himself available there, in contrast to sitting in his office waiting for students to approach. Students used this opportunity to present their idea of a car-free campus, and now 2 years later, parts of that will actually become a reality. So, to sum it up, I was asked to share what I have learned about co-designing the future of learning with youth. The future of learning requires more than working on details. It requires you to open up spaces, become curriculum minimalists to find room for arts and for projects. Then go out of your offices, see the students and approach them. They are more active than you think. And if you believe you do not have any students interested in bringing change at your university, my name is Michael Winter. I'm the co-president of Oikos International, a global community of young change agents, and I'm happy to support you in your endeavor to empower students at your institution. Thank you.
Thank you so much, dear Michael, for sharing that, particularly at such a late hour as well in China on your break. And I think it gives a really great picture of what can happen on campus, in the student rooms, with the students themselves. And this is something that Oikos does day in, day out. And I was with the students, I think last Sunday or the Sunday before, sharing a little bit more and trading experiences of how we approach co-designing with youth the future of learning. And it's an opportunity now just to have as our final case study, sharing a little bit more on our experience with the Youth Design Challenge, before we will pass as well to get some of your views as well. And so we started this chapter of the session today very briefly on this slide, where we shared a little bit more from our community on some of the discoveries through different design sessions with students over the past year on looking at the future of universities. And I think it's a good opportunity now to give yourself, Francois, the floor to share a little bit more briefly around how this has formed part of the story of LPI. And then we'll be giving the time to particularly Daniel to share as one of the finalists for our Youth Design Challenge a little bit more about his experience co-designing the future of learning as well. So Francois, I give you the floor first.
Thanks, Ed, and thanks for all of you and for those that spoke before me that gave inspiring stories. I think that, you know, talking about our own stories, we started 20 years ago in a room that was, you know, just with a few students. And for some reason, we doubled in size every 18 months over the last 20 years or so. And I guess that's because every time we invited students in co-designing, you know, the next step, they were pleased enough to invite their friends the next time. So this way we kept growing. And so we co-designed physical spaces, we co-designed learning spaces, we co-designed curricula, we co-designed diplomas. Now we try to co-design the future of university, and we try to do this with the student perspective in mind, while, you know, listening to what's the frame and what are the degrees of freedom within that frame, and how can we evolve the frame and the degrees of freedom in order to maximize fruitfulness. You know, typically, you know, fruitfulness may be different in different contexts, but if the students define not only the frame and the degrees of freedom, but also what they define as fruitful for them, it's a way to adapt to their needs and to their possibilities. And so we've been doing this for a while now, initially localized in Paris, where you're all welcome to come and visit us. I know many of you have already been here, but I'll be happy to host you whenever you feel like it. And what we're trying to do now is to scale this. You know, one of our unfair advantages being based in Paris is that OECD, UNESCO, and many other are also based in Paris, and we have quite a few visitors. You know, just think about the Olympic Games that are about to open, and so we try to also discuss with people coming from all over the world what's the best way to redesign learning. So UNESCO played a key role in the Transforming Education Summits and in the Youth Declaration we heard about. And, you know, this will of the UN Secretary General to co-construct the future with youth, we took seriously. So we've invited young people from all over the world to tell us what sort of planetary university they would want to have for tomorrow. You know, how would they define themselves as global citizens, what we call no planetism, and how they want to make a difference for the world. And this idea of students that want to be the best learners for the world rather than compete with one another in the old system is a key design principle. And that's really the purpose of what we're trying to do. And so we would like to have students that learn to care for self, others, and the planet, and develop the 21st century skills that are needed for peace and sustainable development. And we would like to address this, first of all, with the learners of all ages, but also with the teachers and the researchers that want to study this very process. Because university do research on many topics, but very few people like Manja research the university itself. And so how can we redesign the university, and how can we research the best way to redesign the university, hear voice, hearing youth solution, and defining the best way to co-govern together. And so we've heard about some of this already, and I think Daniel will give you an illustration of what youth perspective can be. And, you know, I was blessed to receive his message before this session, so I'm glad that he will be able to expect the best way to co-design university, because personally I will sign for everything that he will have to say. So I'd rather give him my time to present rather than, you know, keep speaking a little more. And maybe Daniel, you can tell us, you know, where your ideas come from and where your passion comes from to change the system. And by the way, also how old you are, because I think talking about youth, you might be the youngest person in this chat today.
Just very, very briefly before Daniel, you do speak, and thank you, Francois, for giving that time. Firstly, I had a couple of questions. I forgot to mention, as we are friends, your title, Francois. So Francois is co-founder alongside Ariel, who I'm delighted is in the call as well today, of Learning Planet Institute, and is the president of the Institute, the Chief Exploration Officer, for those particularly interested too. And the second I should say as well is that we have Pearl also on the call, who was the winner of the Youth Design Challenge from last year from South Africa, but currently in Rwanda, and has an electricity shortage, and this is the final bit of her battery for today. So we're not sure how long Pearl can stay or not, but I really wanted to firstly state that for the challenges that we always recognize in accessibility, the incredible commitment of young people, and we're very sensitive to carrying that weight and responsibility of many of the commitments. And perhaps we will hear as well from Pearl before the end of the session, but a huge gratitude to you too for being there, and do introduce yourself as well in the chat. And then I will now give the floor to Daniel, and do share by sharing your age and your experience as well on the Youth Design Challenge.
Hi everyone, I'm Daniel, I'm 15 years old, I'm from California, I'm a Learning Plan Youth Fellow and a finalist for the Planetizm University Design Challenge. So I'll just take a little bit of time to share about my experience. So first of all, it was amazing. Thank you to Ed, first of all, for moderating this meeting, and also for the well-organized meetings for the Design Challenge, supplying the resources, the detailed product page, the pitch deck template, and giving guidance to all of the finalists throughout. I had a lot of fun developing my idea over the past 6 months under the Learning Plans team and Ed's mentorship. And my idea was focused on helping people get green jobs and develop skills for green jobs. And the fellow finalists, when we're working together, there's a strong sense of community because of how collaboration is emphasized. And I'm really grateful to Learning Planner for the opportunity to share part of my project in a workshop early this month. And I would recommend everyone here to apply for the Design Challenge if it interests you, or to look at what other people are doing in the Design Challenge. It's a really great way to see what other people are doing in their own communities. And thank you to the passionate mentors at Learning Planet. You guys are so supportive. Some of them are not on this call, but thank you to Ed and Francois and everyone who wasn't able to make it today. It's a great help in helping all of the finalists launch their products. And earlier, Michael Winter explained that we can't necessarily use a blueprint in our own context because everybody's context is different. So I think that this design challenge is a great way to, it relates to what Michael said, because in everybody's own context, this challenge gives them a way to develop their own idea and their body under retention. And if you'd like me to share a little bit about what I think about the guiding principles, if that's okay, if that's fine with you, Francois.
Please do, Daniel. And we've just as well added into the chat, just very briefly, a little bit more around the design challenge. And we'll be sharing just after Daniel how we'll be coming back next year, hopefully with more and more access to different students sharing their next dreams for the universities of the future. So, but first, Daniel, it'd be great to hear your reactions from today.
Yeah, so first of all, I think my number one guiding principle is planetizenship. If you're not familiar with it, it's part of Learning Planet. It's a philosophy, an inclusive philosophy, which is meant to guide sustainable development for a prosperous future for all stakeholders. I think that's really important when we're co-designing anything, especially something like a learning program for the future, because we always need to be mindful of sustainable development, not just development. And my second is unity. We need to look for planetizens across age, gender, and borders, and unite in common goals. And that way we can actually have a sustainable planet. And my third is clarity of vision. So I think it's really important to be clear on what we're trying to solve. There's so many problems that so many people are working on. And when you're working with others, it's very, very important, if you're all focused on the same goal, to be very clear about specifically what that goal is and really clear on your next steps. And that just makes it more efficient to help solving your problems. And lastly, I'll just share my last guiding principle. I believe that it's empowerment. It's very so important to empower youth with knowledge and tools to contribute to our future, and that's part of what I'm trying to do with my own project under the Planetizm University Design Challenge. And I think that everybody should be focused on empowering youth because we are the future. Thank you for your time, everyone.
Thank you so much, Daniel, for sharing your experiences from San Francisco. And I think as well, what we'll be doing is sharing into the chat, and Daniel, if you can do so too. There's a link towards seeing all of the programs from the finalists from the first year of the challenge. And just very briefly on this, we're so glad that it's coming back because we had programs from over 30 countries submitted last year. We had 80 final submissions analysed by the jury, bringing down to a fantastic cohort of finalists who've been supported over this past 6 months to develop their programs and to bring them into reality as well. And we're really glad to relaunch this this September at the UN General Assembly, taking place in New York this September. But that this will also bring together as well an amazing set of speakers and supporters, particularly as well from the UN, UNESCO, United Nations University, and various different partners as well, to really share the importance of having bottom-up challenges and co-design with students at the very, very heart. And just to give you a quick picture as well, if I head onto the site, here we go. So sharing, launching at the UN General Assembly, and then we have 2 months where we'll be gathering submissions between October and December from students from around the world. So we don't hesitate to share and pass this opportunity on to your students, and to let us know as well if you are interested in developing this further with us. We've had amazing conversations in the past couple of weeks with universities across the world who are joining on board bar to bar this morning. I'll be sharing this with all of their students too. And so what we'll be doing is that at the International Day of Education in January, around the Lonely Planet Festival, we will be celebrating the finalists before restarting this process of incubating and developing the ideas over the first half of next year. And this is really crucial for us, that when we see co-design as not just starting with an idea, recognizing the best, but really building ideas into programs over the course of the year, connecting progressively, incrementally with more and more university partners who might be able to help support, bring these programs into reality. And then really feeding this process year on year as we gather more and more brilliant, not just ideas, but programs in action from students around the world. So really encourage you to explore a little bit more, share the link to the site where you can also learn more about the finalist programs. You can see their training programs live via our projects platform in the link here, as well as learn a little bit more about the themes for this year and why they are particularly important for us as well. Just what I will do now before we pass to the whole community is with this slide up to see if Pearl, you are able to speak very briefly as well from Rwanda, if your connection and battery allows. So perhaps share briefly your experience, where you see as co-designing, what you see as meaning that to you, and briefly your experience as part of the design challenge over this past few months.
Sure, thanks, Ed. Hi, Umaraho from Rwanda, everyone. I'm sorry about my battery. Literally, my it cut off. It's because of that. My name's Paul. I'm from South Africa. I'm one of the finalists from the first Youth Design Challenge from last year. And it's really a pleasure to sit in the space with everyone. So the first question was, what does it mean to co-design with youth? For me, I really like breaking down terms to get to its most simplest components. So if you break down co-designing, you first come to co and then design. The co aspect of it, internet sites is collaborative, but I like taking a step forward to say that it should be compassionate design processing as well as collective wisdom and understanding. So taking and sourcing from different communities. As another thing in my program design for the Youth Design Challenge is taking inspirational wisdom from the indigenous communities around the world to help with future well-being. So interweaving all of those things together.
Why I think the youth design challenge is operational is because you use programs like this every day. If you think about the conventional institutes that we have, especially our tertiary institutes, it doesn't serve the youth of today in terms of also helping them with self-awareness, planetary awareness, and their space in terms of developing sustainable projects and sustainable living and means. The Youth Design Challenge allows you to have a space, have a voice, and a platform to show that they feel are very necessary, not only for the current generation, but for the future generations come. And I think that not only my project, but all the other participants and finalists have such amazing things to contribute in terms of their ideology and their projects. And I think everyone should give it a try and really go through those list of projects and collaborate with them as well. In terms of where the ideas come from is exactly this. I like traveling and going into the grassroots and going to organizations, communities, and villages to understand what are the challenges that the youth face in those communities, looking at the differences between different regions, and then finding a curriculum and best practices that work and interweaving them together. Right now, I'm in a village called Kiareri, and it is a village that is 2.5 hours outside of Kigali. I'm at a foundation called Heroes Children's Foundation, where the founder gave to his community because there's limited amount of schools here for kids, and they have to walk 7 kilometers to get to one. So he provides free education and alternative education systems for them. There's another in Gahanga called Nook Hub, which facilitates alternative education, where there's a self-directed learning approach instead of having a teacher-student interface. It's more of you are given a YouTube video and you learn how to do and apply those particular skills. So it's going through all of these processes, going to these places and really finding what works for people and sharing expertise as well. So I think I'm going to stop there, and I hope that it was clear enough. Thanks, Ed.
Thank you so much, Pearl. It was crystal clear for connection as well, and thanks for giving your time and ideas too. And so that closes off our series of case studies, but we also started to get some reactions from you too. And I'm delighted that we're opening up to the gallery view as well. I have to apologize that we have slightly less time than promised to get shared views. But what I just wanted to do is add the link as well back again to our Mentimeter that we started at the beginning, because we were looking at initially, as a reminder, what does co-design mean to you, with particular focus on collaboration, diversity, inclusivity. We then explored, and this speaks to what you were saying, Carl, as well, around breaking up into pieces, but co-designing learning. So here, inclusion, inclusive learning came up particularly, as well as accessibility as well. And then lastly, co-designing learning with youth. What comes front and center is empowerment, listening, unity, innovation, and a number of other key points as well. But perhaps just to, if we give 5 minutes or so, if you can raise your hand when we think of this word of what are co-designing or key guiding principles for you for co-design. If you feel that there's something missing from the conversation that you have a real burning desire to share, just in 20 seconds or so, then we'd be glad to pass the mic to you. And otherwise, we will also invite final words from our speakers as well. So I'll give you an opportunity. If there is something you feel missing, there's been so much shared via the chat already that you would like to add on to, then do raise your hand. But I feel like the conversation's already going well. So if you do raise your hand, if you've got something you'd like to share. Karambir, over to you.
Hi, good evening, everyone. Just wanted to bring out the points of, shifting focus from extrinsic motivation to intrinsic motivation, generally not just in schools. So moving away from competition towards collaboration, and of course the importance of making equitable access to all resources, to empower everyone.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that. And Benedicta, do you want to share?
Yes, I want to share something about co-designing. I think we must emphasize on skill building and also skill sharing towards all the parties that we are involving in our collaboration efforts. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And Matthew.
Yeah, so hello everybody. I'm Daniel's brother. I'm 13 and I just wanted to share some things that I think are guiding principles of Planetism University. So what I wanted to share with you was diversity. So definitely having a diverse audience so you can get multiple viewpoints from different parties and people with different backgrounds. And then also collaboration is a big part, as well as accessibility, which people have already said before, but I think accessibility is a really big part of it. So thank you.
Thank you. Thanks so much. Yeah, and I want to give a big shout out to Divya. I know is in the call, one of the finalists from the Design Challenge, who did an amazing program around learning accessibility too. So Divya, I do really encourage you to share that in the chat as well before we finish off the session.
Thank you.
Thank you for sharing those views as well. And then if we just have, as we have a minute or so left, I'd love to give the floor, perhaps Manja, if you could just share, you began speaking. What are your reactions from the session? What do you take with you? Perhaps in just a minute, that would be great.
Yeah, I'm a little bit overwhelmed, to be honest. There were so many interesting ideas. The chat was on fire. We were debating there. I think where we came, basically, I kind of was stuck in my topic on involving young people in educational governance. And I think that many of us are burdened by the resistance that we often face by school leaders and university leaders of having students and young people have a voice in decision processes. They fear they will be too disruptive, that they will be preventing consensual decision making. And I think that we really have to get away from this, of that fear and think about, if we are establishing a new institution, if we are innovating in a new form of educational institutions, what kind of a governance would we like to have? How we would like to have the community of that institution decide on the issues important for the institutions together? And what does that mean for the young people's voice in those decisions? So I think we kind of have to try to forget the fears and the positions and all the old narratives and the traditions and the myths and the fear sometimes, how disruptive and how problematic the decisions will be if young people are brought on board, and really think about them, what they can bring to this conversation, how that will help them develop the ownership of the institution, a sense of belonging, and also find the purpose, their own purpose as part of the institution, as part of the knowledge community of that institution, and also contribute to understanding of the schools and universities and other education institutions as learning institutions themselves that have to transform and have to develop. So this is where I was in my little space. I also posted my presentation and the link to it as well, with all of the references that I have mentioned, just in case. But I do urge you, do read the UN Youth Declaration on Transforming Education, because it's really the first document where youth role, student role in decision processes, in education decision making are spelled out and affirmed in unprecedented ways. So I'm very hopeful about this development. I have been fighting for student rights for many years as a student activist, long time ago. Haven't seen this happen, that it would actually be affirmed on that high level in that very explicit terms. So this is from me, but love the discussions, love hearing all of the interventions and the panelists and the chat. I'm still reading it feverishly as we speak. Thank you so much. It was lovely to be with you. Greetings from Slovenia, where I am right now, Slovenia.
Thank you so much, Manja. And if you permit me, Francois and Michael, I'll just give the final minute or so to Arissa, one of our youth speakers, to close off, if that's okay, with your reactions. What do you carry with you back into your studies, your work, your holidays, hopefully as well? That would be great to hear from you.
Thank you. Oh man, now I feel like all this pressure that I have the final word. But no, it's been an absolute pleasure being here with everyone. I think as someone who's actually applying to higher education programs coming up, I'm about to finish my final year of high school. I think what Manja said about being bold and being brave, as a young person, that's something that I'm gonna try and hold very close to me, especially when I'm considering what I want to do next. I think that at the end of the day, like, this change is not something that we just want, but it's something we need. And I think it's become extremely clear through all the interventions today. And I would just say, like, this is just the start. And I think collaboration, as we've seen today with hearing so many different perspectives, is really how we're going to make that change. And yeah, I would encourage everyone. I think for me, like, it's in my own life, it's about questioning the systems that I've been in. You know, as a student at a United World College School, I actually had the opportunity to visit Learning Plan Institute this year with some of my peers, and we were trying to come up with ideas on how to transform our own education systems. And I think for any like young people on the call, I would encourage you to also remember that you have that kind of power, and to reach out. You're gonna get a million no's, but the one yes that you will get, like the one I got from Ed, will definitely make a difference. And yeah, so thank you everyone today, and I'm really looking forward to connecting with you all again soon.
Thank you so much, Arissa. I won't say anything more from that. I'll invite everyone who would like to turn on the cameras for a quick closing photo, so that we can celebrate this amazing 90 minutes together. So I will just count from 3 to 1, and if you turn on your camera if you'd like to be part of it, that'd be great. So 3.
What are microphones?
Oh, and microphones too. So from 3 to 1, on after 1, you are welcome to say cheese, co-design, whatever you would like. 3, 2, 1.
Congrats, co-design.
Here we go. We can do whatever we plan to do.
I love you, Ed.
You got it.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, everyone. Have a great day, and we'll be following up with all the amazing resources gathered from today, from the chat, and all the speakers. Have a great summer. Speak to you soon.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Ed.
Everyone. Cheers, folks.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ed.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks, everyone.
Bye, folks.
Bye.
Great job, Ed. Well done. Thanks.
Appreciate it. Thank you, everybody.
Ed, I miss you.
I miss you too. We need to have the hug soon. See you all soon, guys.